Well, hello, everybody, and happy Wednesday. Welcome to Behind the Scenes with Black Women in Podcasting, a series spotlighting the trailblazing Black women in the podcast industry. Tonight, we have our first of three guests. I am delighted to have this conversation with Casby Bias. She is a podcast producer for iHeartMedia Podcast Animator, an executive producer and host of Adulting 101 with Casby Bias. Casby, tell us a little bit more about you.
Yes. So hi, thank you, Deneen, and hi everybody. Nice to meet you. My name is as Deneen said, and my name is Casby Bias. I am essentially a podcast producer for iHeartMedia. And then on the side, I have my own business called C Bias Productions, where I essentially develop podcasts for other clients within the area, as well as animations. I create animated shorts for both TikTok and Instagram. And sometimes I combine the two as well. So I have my own podcast called Adulting 101 with Casby Bias. And that is essentially where the main platform where I combine podcasting and animations by developing animated teasers to promote each podcast episode that I put out there. So, yes, that is a little bit about me.
Yeah, and your animations are so cute. You have a little, I don't know if it's called avatar, but you have your little avatar, as I'm going to call it. Correct me. It's so cute. It looks just like you, and you have a good time in your video. So that's so fun to watch.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes,
You're
this is my
welcome.
quote unquote alter ego. Her name is Lynn. And yeah, we just love being able to dance and based off of different types of trends that are happening on TikTok or Instagram and sharing it with everybody. So on behalf of Lynn, she thanks you and I thank you as well.
Well, all right, awesome. And you just mentioned that you have C-Bias production, and you help people or you produce podcasts, et cetera, locally. Locally is where?
Atlanta, Georgia. That's where I'm
Okay.
currently located.
Awesome. For those that are listening or watching, and you want to, reach out and work with Casby, she's in the ATL. So holla. So, what does your job as a podcast producer for iHeartMedia entail? Talk to us about it.
Oh yeah, sure. Yes. So as far as my role for iHeartMedia, I essentially run at this time I run two shows and I do some editing work on a number of other shows as well. But it usually ranges between managing 2 to 3 shows on my behalf. And so essentially what I do for my job is I run those shows and do everything from um, wrangling the hosts and the guests together as far as having them record down to actually publishing and posting accordingly. So, just to start things off in general, um, the 2 shows that I run right now, one is focused on parenthood and one is focused on true crime history. I am not a parent, and I also, the closest that I've been to learning about true crime or just crime in general has been watching Law and Order with my mom whenever I would visit her. But it's been a very much good learning process to be able to learn from both of those aspects and move along accordingly. So for both of those shows, but especially with the parenting show, I essentially come together with the host and figure out what types of topics are going to be talked more about for each particular episode or season that may come up and what have you. I also develop different types of topics and guests that could come on to the show. And then from there, I essentially move forward into actually reaching out to the guests who could talk to those particular topics, or perhaps guests that I thought, they would be pretty good as far as bringing onto the show. Then from there, if they respond with a yes, I essentially do everything as far as the scheduling. So making sure that whatever times work with them also work accordingly with the host that would be for that particular show. And then after I'm done with scheduling, making sure that everything's in order, sending out the invites accordingly, we then move to the step of actually meeting. So usually it's virtually. At times it could be like within a studio, give or take, but the majority of the time it is virtually. So I come on- coming come through and just go through and make sure that everything sounds good audio wise. And if there are any questions that need to be addressed, I answer those accordingly between the host and the guest or guests that may be coming onto the show. And then from there, if there's any additional questions that I may see fit as far as could possibly be brought onto the particular or into the particular interview, I pitch those or send it over to the host. And even before then, as far as the researching process with everything, like the entire call, entire conversation, what have you, I'm the one who does all the research as far as figuring out what exactly we're going to be asking the guest who will be coming onto the show, or when it comes to a topic, what types of deep questions we'll get more into as far as that specific topic. So all of those are brought into the session for the host, and the host essentially goes through those accordingly. And if there are any other questions that I feel like are very important or need to be brought up within the conversation, I just shoot over those questions accordingly. And then from there, after everything's wrapped up as far as the call or recording, I then transition into the editing phase. So, making sure that everything sounds good, working with sound design, music, anything, what have you, in regard to that process, taking out ums or uhs, make essentially making sure that everything sounds good. And then the last step would be just essentially publishing. So making the episodes available for all of those to listen to on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite shows. So yeah, that's essentially the overall breakdown as far as what I do for my position. Yes.
Yeah, and that's a lot, right? That's a lot to a lot of responsibility, especially that you're doing it for two different shows. So I actually had an experience with a podcast producer. I was talking with this person about being on a show. I don't remember the show. Don't really remember what the topic was or what their focus was. Their focus was kind of on like, well, the way that the person was drilling me, because they were really drilling me, like trying to pull this out and pull that out. And I'm like, hey, I don't have a sob story. I don't have that. I've gotten to the place that I'm at, based on, just putting in the work or whatever. But she just kept trying to pull a sob story, and I didn't have one. And needless to say, I was not on that particular show. I never did hear back from them. But I did want to kind of go back. So yes, they're two totally different shows. So
Mhm.
you're definitely having to like, okay, switch up, right? And so that's amazing, right? Having to manage all of that, like the what you're doing, the steps, the tasks, etc. They're the same, but again, the topics are so totally different. There's this show on, I think, Peacock, and it's not 100% sure of the name, but it's like true crime podcast.
Mhm.
And it's hilarious because it's based off of a current serial killer. So this woman and her husband, like the woman goes to her husband with an idea. Hey, let's start this podcast. Let's focus on this current serial killer. And then they suspect that it's their plumber. and and so they're doing like this little, like researching and whatnot, following him around, and it ends up being the plumber. And so he's in on it. So like the three of them are like making this podcast, and it's just the craziest thing. It's pretty good. I've watched all of season one, so can't wait for season two.
Yeah, I'm
But
pretty sure I heard about the
yeah,
show too. That one came out pretty recent, correct?
mhm, mhm.
Who's on the show again?
You know what? Actually, I don't really know any of the names. The characters, they're like real names.
Mhm.
But it's pretty good. Like I said, it's on Peacock, and yes, it is current. Like it just came out, I believe, just a few months ago.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then a part about the wrangling the hosts and guests, and I was laughing at that because talent, like right, talent is always let's see, how do we you have to be delicate with talent sometimes, regardless of what industry you're in. So when you said wrangle them, I knew exactly what you were talking about.
Yes, it can be a pretty crazy process as far as like, yes, as I said, like wrangling everybody together, but it's definitely rewarding, especially once you're actually sitting there and you have everybody together and you're like, wow, I did this and this is
Right?
actually finally happening. Yeah.
Right? Amazing. Awesome. So I want to just, kind of level set with those that are watching or listening. So the purpose of this series, Behind the Scenes with Black Women in Podcasting, is to introduce and or educate and let everybody know that there are Black women behind the scenes in podcasting, right? We're not all just hosts. We're not all just in front of the camera or on the mic. There are plenty of us that are behind the scenes. And so Casby is one of those who, like I said, she's our one of three. So that's one point of the series. The other is actually to educate you all that are interested in becoming a Black woman or even a man um, behind the scenes, right? And so some of the stuff, we're going to talk about like how she got to that point. Like, how did she get to a podcast producer? She's going to drop some nuggets for you all that would help you if you're interested in going into podcast producing or even in the other areas that she's involved in. So that takes me right into what led you to become a podcast producer.
Um, yeah, so that's a pretty good question. I would say it's been a definitely hasn't been a linear path thus far, but so I essentially so let me just backtrack, like go a little bit back. So essentially, I got into podcasting a little bit after I left grad school, essentially. So I had left grad school, way back into the past, and I was at the time I was deciding like, okay, so what am I gonna do moving forward? And I around that period of time, I actually came into working for a specific company actually here within Atlanta or nearby anyway, more like northern way. But I had a job with corporate America at the time, and so I came in as an intern and further developed as far as just the overall supervisor, just helping as far as communications in general. And so during that time period, I was given a lot of different types of communications tasks, and one of those was actually to develop podcasts essentially by going to executive staff members or even just coworkers, basically asking them more about their lives and how they got into corporate America in general. And so I would go around. I was taught what types of equipment we would be able to use as far as like the mics and what have you. And I would go around and interview people, ask them different types of questions, getting my research going and on and everything like that. And I've developed a number of different types of podcasting shows at the time. Now, back then, we didn't call it podcasting. We just called it, I guess, like recording. We didn't have a specific name for it,
Okay.
but it was definitely podcasting. And so we had different types of shows that I ended up producing here and there. And over time, I continued to do that outside of the company as well. So I had developed different types of shows here and there. One of them including like a business news podcast that I uploaded myself and overall developed and put it on YouTube, and just to further learn about the business industry in general, but also to practice those podcasting skills even further. And then fast forward after all the development of other different types of podcasting shows, as well as my independent shows. Um, Fast forward to the pandemic, basically. Yeah, so during that time, 2020, it was feeling very, apocalypsy. And
Mhm.
I was like, all right, so yeah, it looks like the world's going to end soon. So if I wanted to leave anything on this world, what exactly would it be? And so I was like, oh, well, I could go ahead and develop like a podcast. That would be pretty cool. But what exactly would I talk about was the main question at the time. And so, ironically, around that same period of time, my younger brother, he was actually, or I just have one brother, my brother, who is younger than me, he was actually graduating with his MBA at the time. And I noticed that he was going through the same things that I myself had gone through after I'd graduated from grad school, like different things as figuring out how to transition from college into the quote unquote working world. And so I was like, okay, so let's go ahead and dive more into that and develop a podcast, make a mark, if you will, with that particular podcast that focuses on like adulting things that they don't necessarily teach you in college. So that's essentially how I got even further into the podcasting industry by developing my own official indie podcast. Now that was around the time where it was officially called podcasting. So that's I would say that that was the official time when I had started it and people started to pick up on it and listen to the different episodes here and there. But yes, that's how I would say officially started in the podcasting industry, and it only grew from there.
Yeah, and so you did mention that, your start was not linear. You had an internship. Was it a communications internship? Just
Yes,
ended
it
up
was
okay.
I'd say like communications, business development, if you will.
Mhm. And but that was very progressive of that company to have whatever it was called podcast at that time. Because even today, a lot of companies are not there yet, right? So for whenever this was, for them to do something that's podcast like was definitely very progressive. So what you know now, so based on what you know now, based on your experiences up until this point, what do those who are interested in being a podcast producer, what do they need to know? Like, how do they get started? Um, what are some things that they can do to get experience?
Yes. So I would say, first and foremost, to definitely develop your own things that you'd like to put out to the public, your own podcast. So even today, like we've mentioned, I have my own indie podcast, and um, overall, essentially, that had actually helped me get my job at iHeartMedia. Like they told me as I was going through the interviewing process, they were like, "Well, we were going to hire you anyway because you're awesome and everything, and we've seen your podcast or listened to your podcast, and it's awesome." I was like, "Oh, okay, so that's incredible. Thank you."
Right?
But yes, just I would definitely say create your own podcast, pitch it out, put it out to the public, publish it as often as you possibly can, and just overall make your mark on the world. That is definitely one way to do so, as far as talking about a topic that you are very much passionate about, and essentially going from there. I would say as well, as far as getting more into podcasting, another way would have to be just overall networking with other individuals, um, seeing if they will be able to further collab with you in regard to, let's say that there's a specific podcasting idea that you may have, and perhaps you want to partner with somebody else to have like a co-host or something like that. So going to local or either or even outside of local events and conferences, what have you, just to further connect with other podcasters who will be able to support and help you. I would say that that's definitely essential as far as getting further out the word out there about what you are trying to do.
Yeah, and that's
Um,
actually how you and I met. We met at what was that podcast? What was podcast? Was it podcast
oh,
movement in
podcast
Las
evolution.
Vegas?
Yes.
Yeah, that's how we met. And then you also you moderated a panel a few months back, and I forget for what conference. It wasn't a podcast, I don't think.
No, it wasn't. Yes. So that was actually for the Afro Animation Summit. So it was like oh goodness, I don't even remember what month that was. It was a little while back though, but yes, that was a really awesome opportunity to be able to network with other individuals who are also in the media industry, only more specifically for animation. But yes, I was able to network and everything with that as well. And also shout out to Deneen too. Like she connected me, told me more about the opportunity as well. So definitely, I would definitely recommend as far as networking with other individuals too, because then you get to hear about those different opportunities and how you can further support other podcasters and get into other different types of fields as well.
And these are just a couple examples of the value of networking or relationship building. As Casby, as she mentioned, as something that has been beneficial to her in collaborating. And so I also at this point want to throw out there, so if you all are not already planning on it, you'll have that opportunity to build relationships, network, learn from others, collaborate in October at Afros and Audio. So make sure you check that out and plan to be there. We'll be there as well. We'll actually be on the main stage, and we're going to bring all the speakers from the series are going to be together and continue the dialogue. But prior to each month, we're doing one-on-one so that you can know a little bit about the guests a little bit more intimately. So now, of course, I'm sure there's some highs and some lows. Being a Black woman, right? Being a woman as well as a Black woman, Black person. So share some of those with us.
Yes, highs and lows. So as far as highs, I would say, I mean, it's just overall exciting to be able to tell your own personal stories that you may be going through, or just being able to talk about different topics that other people might be able to relate to. Again, with my adulting podcast, it definitely helped that I went through those previous experiences that I talk about on my show, and even reaching to as many as like four seasons worth of podcasting episodes. And to this day, the show still runs. So very much excited about that, and excited to talk more about different types of topics that relate to uh, adulting professionals out there. But just to be able to overall experience all of that and essentially move forward is essentially good as far as that in general. Um, any other ups? Just to be able to collaborate and connect with other individuals as well is definitely important, because you get to actually relate to other individuals too who are going through the same things that you may be going through, or even talking about topics that you haven't necessarily considered about, or that you haven't necessarily considered before. But after connecting with them and being able to collaborate with them and work amongst yourselves as far as different opportunities out there, you're just proud of that, not only diversity as far as the topics that are being discussed, but just diversity in general. Because I know as far as just different types of platforms out there, be it television, film, what have you, there may be certain times where it feels very secluded.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as podcasting, it feels very much open. Everybody is very much willing to help each other out. So that's definitely an up when it comes to, or an additional up, excuse me, when it comes to podcasting in general. As far as downs, I would have to say, really the main one, if I had to sum it all up, would have to be just overall getting your foot in the door. And even when you have your foot in the door, just continuing to have your foot in the door, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
whether that, yes, so whether that be just overall finding out what opportunities are out there, um, trying to connect with bigger companies out there as well, um, and just to continue within the industry. I mean, even now, I mean, with all the different types of news going out there as far as different companies trying to figure out what their next steps are, as far as podcasting in general, it's very difficult to figure out how to continue within a particular industry and continue to flourish and move in different avenues that you'd like to move in thus far. So um, definitely getting your foot in the door, being noticed by different types of big companies out there is definitely one thing I would bring up. But also continuing to have your foot in the door, continuing to meet the quote unquote right people in order to continue to navigate in different areas, whether that be having your shows picked up, um, or being considered for different opportunities here and there. Those things, really, I would say in other industries definitely exist wherever you go, but it definitely does exist as far as podcasting as well. So I would say overall, those will be the highs and lows as far as being a Black woman within podcasting. or a Black professional within podcasting in general. So it comes with pros and cons, but I definitely feel like as we continue to push forward, pros
Are
definitely
outweighing.
outweigh.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear. And you know what? Honestly, they're the same and similar as in other industries, as in corporate America. When you say get your foot in and keep putting your foot in, absolutely. Like you can't just once you get the job, that's just part of it. Like you have to do well, right? You have to do well, and you have to stay visible, right? Yeah, especially now
Right,
that a lot is virtual, right? It's easy for people to forget about you. And
right.
often they're not even thinking about us anyway. So we definitely have to stay out front,
Mhm.
have those regular conversations, let people know what we're interested in,
Right,
asking for what it is that we want, and continue to demonstrate that we definitely, can do it, that we deserve it, right? That we'll do a good job at it. I want to go back to, when you said you started at, when you were going through the interview process with, iHeartMedia. So the job that you applied for, was it for the podcast producer or was it for something else?
no, it was actually for the podcast producer role.
Got
Yes.
it. Okay. And so, one of the things that you recommended is that, go ahead and start your own podcast, right? Because right there, that is the demonstration that you can do the job, right? And you talked about something that was passionate, but as long as it's something that maybe that you're passionate about, your podcast had nothing to do with what you actually ended up doing or the topics that you ended up doing for iHeart, right?
Oh, sorry, didn't. Could you repeat your question? I didn't hear the last part.
Oh yeah. So basically, so you recommended, start a podcast, and that's a way to demonstrate your talent, right? Your knowledge, expertise, etc. And so what I said is the topic of your podcast had nothing to do with any of the topics or the podcasts that you ended up producing, correct?
Right. Yes, that's correct. So my podcast or my indie podcast is focused on adulting.
Hmm.
But my current focus is right now, as far as the shows that I develop, one is focused on parenthood and the other one's focused on true crime history. So when it comes to podcasting in general, y- there there are a lot of times where essentially you don't get to choose which particular genre or topic, what have
Yeah.
you, that you get to get into. Um, But I mean, that's all the more reason just to be able to learn and be open to different types of opportunities. So it's definitely an adventure as far as just being able to learn about different types of topics and other different types of things that you could learn about that you haven't necessarily considered before.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like, how do you find out about different podcast opportunities? Like, did you go to a specific website that lists podcast producer roles, or how are we finding those roles today?
Yes. So as far as how I found my role with iHeartMedia, um, back in 2020, essentially, so everything was shut down during that period of time. Um, and I actually found the role via connecting with other individuals, but also on LinkedIn essentially. And so I actually didn't know that it was iHeartMedia right off the bat. And if I did, it was just like quickly mentioned.
Hmm.
Um, but it was mentioned like later on as far as the overall process. But so once I saw the application, it essentially was outlined as it being a smaller company that was part of iHeartMedia. So
Got
I
it.
would say, as far as recommending similar steps to other individuals who want to get further into podcasting, definitely reaching out to smaller podcast companies or studios and seeing how you will be able to assist that way. I would definitely recommend that, as you never really know where you're going, where your path will take you. Um, so that would definitely be a the main thing that I would recommend as far as that avenue.
So it goes
Um,
back to the building the relationships and the networking and being in those spaces where those people are so that you can meet them.
right, exactly, yes, and that's another thing too. Once you network with other individuals as well, you get to learn about different types of job boards, or even going to the conferences out there and workshops that are mentioned. You get to learn about the different types of job opportunities that may be out there and available to you, and you get to check those particular opportunities out, apply, and see where that adventure takes you on that avenue as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned LinkedIn because LinkedIn is like my number one. Right now, I'm on a social media break. However, I am most active on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is not your, back in the day, just going on to find a job, like just a corporate job or a regular job. It's so much more, right? They have podcasting, they have audio events, they have live streams. There's so much, and they really want creators. They kind of like want to take us from all the other social media platforms. Like they want us on LinkedIn doing everything that we do. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I'm also going to plug something else. So I did do a LinkedIn session for BPA a couple months ago. So if you want to, learn a little bit more about LinkedIn and how to use it today, definitely check that out. So you produce content while at Spelman. Were you always interested in production? What about it appeals to you, and why should others pursue this field? And one of the things that you have talked about is that it gives an opportunity for us to use our voices, right? That we get to own, like if it's our show, we get to talk about what we want to talk about. But yeah, let's kind of find about your history when you were at Spelman.
Yes. So essentially, as far as how I found that particular opportunity, so just as overall outline, so as I mentioned, I have my own company called Casby Bias Productions, LLC, and so that company is specifically geared toward developing podcasts for local clients, as well as creating animated shorts. And so one of the opportunities that I was able to get through my business, Seabass Productions, was working with Spelman College. And so I always wanted to go there. I didn't go there though. Seems like awesome university or college or school, but it when I was very much ecstatic and excited once I heard about the opportunity that they would like for, or that they wanted me to come on to help them with a particular project. I reached out to them just asking if they would need any help as far as communications with any different types of projects that they may be working on within the future, and they had noted like, oh, okay, so we're actually working on a couple of things right now. How would you like to come on and work with us accordingly? So I was like, heck yeah. So I so that's how I essentially worked with them for that particular project, um, specifically geared toward like COVID-19, just further developing a video for them and helping them with that particular initiative, um, as far as resources or guidance that students and staff would have you would be able to use for that specifically accordingly. But as far as that experience in just producing in general, I just very much enjoyed being able to be I would say like a creative producer in general. Like I started back when I was in college, even further back when before grad school, just starting out developing different types of ironically animated animated short um college shorts to be specific, just documenting through an animated version of different types of experiences that other college students were having at the time, and creating like short skits for that, and just further evolving and moving from there. So yeah, I just overall enjoyed the experience to be able to do that and to continue to create content for people thus far, being able to create something from scratch and get the little characters to move around and put it out there accordingly, and see the smiles on the other people's faces and see how they can relate to the other different types of characters that may be put out there. Um, Up until now, I mean, I still get to do that, and I still get to create the little characters, whether that is Will Spellman in college or I've also worked with the Children's Museum of Atlanta not too long ago, and um, ACLU, just different types of nonprofits, corporate companies, just different avenues in which I'm able to further creatively express myself through those avenues and be able to bring something that they may be wanting to bring to life, making that happen for them. And it's just overall rewarding to be able to create things from scratch and to be able to put smiles on people's faces thus far.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thank you for that clarification because when I was reading your bio, I read it as if you had attended Spelman and it was something that you were doing while you
Oh
were
yeah.
pursuing your degree.
I
So,
That would have been awesome, yes. Yeah. But no, I didn't go to Spelman, no, no.
and before we talk more about, what you're doing with young professionals, so, again, we know that networking and building relationships is key and being in those places and spaces. Where would you say you had your most success? Like, I don't, maybe it was a conference, whatever it is. Like, what is that? When was that one time that you had your most successful connection or et cetera? And you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it was a game changer.
Yeah, so I would say, well, Spelman is definitely one that was as far as on top of the list. Like, once I got that opportunity, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I made it. This
Yeah.
is awesome." Uh, but, yes, I would definitely say that that's definitely at the top. Another one would have to be, um yeah, again, how we had mentioned earlier, as far as just Afro Animation Summit. So just to be able to talk about my podcasting as well as animation and what I do for both of those avenues at that conference, like I was able to present in front of at least 500, 600 people, give or take. Never actually been in that type of room as far as just all those people before, which I was like, oh my gosh. And I was a little bit nervous as far as that, but as far as public speaking, I very much enjoy that in general. So once I got there, I was like, "Oh, okay, we're good." So, but like once I first got in front of the crowd, but that's definitely a time where I would say that I definitely felt like I made it as far as just the experience, being able to being able to moderate such a panel with such powerful people on the stage. Um, and to be able to talk with them accordingly. Like one of the panelists as well, she was actually um, a very much a big part as far as producing the animated short Hair Love, the
Mhm.
Oscar winning
Matthew
animated short.
Perry.
So yes, yes. So just to be able to talk with people um, like that within the room and to be able to connect with them accordingly and tell them more about my how I'm mixing animation and podcasting together, and being able to talk about that with so many people and yet so many other people yet to come, manifesting it.
Yes.
It's just a really great experience to be a overall a producer and to be able to see where exactly that journey takes me.
And you know what? I love that you had that experience, that you're saying what you're saying, right? Because, you belong there, right? You mentioned like, oh, being there with powerful people, but guess what? You were there as well, right? And so and that's another thing that happens when we're in these spaces. Sometimes, people feel like they don't belong or, I'm not going to try this because of whatever reasons, but go for it and do it, right? Because it leads to so many other things. Like I believe in attracting and manifesting. You mentioned manifestation, and that is what happens, right? So it's about that attracting and manifesting and doing the work, because it's not about let's just put it on the vision board and keep it moving. It's about envisioning it, journaling it, putting it on a vision board, and doing the work to make it happen for yourself. And here's another thing: recognize when it does actually happen, right? Because so many things happen to us and we don't realize the magnitude of it. So I'm glad that you did and that you're able to share that with us here. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you, Denise. Thank you very much. Yes.
You're welcome. So now I want to dig into, what you do with young professionals. So tell us
Yeah.
more about teaching young professionals how to survive the life after college transition. What life experience led you to creating this space? So I know you mentioned your brother,
Mhm.
um, having graduated same as you had before, and like, okay, what do we do now type thing. And then how does it tie into production and or animation?
Um, yes. So as far as teaching young professionals about just adulting and in general, I feel like I've been trying to do that since I've come out of grad school in general. Whether that and just about I say like life advice
Hmm.
more specifically. I've been trying to teach people about life advice in general, even when I was in school, starting in college, like developing those skits for other students just to show everybody this is what we go through and this is how you can also overcome these experiences from that time to time. And that's really just grown from there into most currently my podcast, Adulting 101 with Casby Bias. Um, and so just being able to express those different types of um, pieces of feedback that I can give other young professionals out there. I very much enjoy being able to do that, mostly because essentially because I've come from that particular background and I know exactly what they're going through and what they're currently going through. Um, and so I feel like that's definitely been beneficial through my podcast, whether it's me providing insight on different topics or it's bringing on other guests onto the show, be they be experts or friends who are also in different industries, but who have gone through similar or the exact same experiences that other young professionals may be going through. I found that to be very essential as far as bringing them onto the show, because a lot of people they just don't talk about these different topics like how to find your first job, how to find your first apartment, um, how to cook a meal without burning it, and that's actually a episode that I put up actually last week as far as for season 4. Um, and so just to be able to go into different topics like that and to be able to dive in deeper with those, I felt it was very much essential and a creative aspect or a creative way to get toward young professionals out there who are more than interested as far as learning about those different topics, but don't necessarily know who to ask or where to go. Because I know for me personally, I didn't know exactly who to reach out to as far as support. And I really felt like I was alone once I had transitioned from grad school into the quote unquote real world. Um, so just be able to develop this podcast is very much important to me as far as that avenue.
Yeah, and
But
it's
just
definitely important in general.
yes, yes, but yes, also just in general as far as life advice. So whether that be through the podcast or continuing to develop different types of animated shorts out there, um, I just find it very much essential just to be able to develop that, develop those different types of platforms and provide any tips or advice any way that I can, and in every different type of creative avenue.
Yeah, and I appreciate you doing that. Really, in essence, it's about it's about life lessons, right? How to navigate life. Because when you think about a student, like let's just say their educational lifespan is from K through 12, right? You're just
Mhm.
constantly putting in the work to get to the next grade. And then it's all to be able to graduate. Then it's to get into college, but nobody's really talking about a transition. There's some talk about transitioning from, let's say, high school to college. So they do pretty much kind of prepare you there. But I'm not sure that they necessarily prepare you for, okay, now after college, right? Because it's almost an expectation you go straight and get a job. And it's like, but wait a
Right.
minute, what is that? You know what I'm saying? Because now you're an adult and there's lots of expectations at this point. So for you to provide what you're providing is definitely valuable, and another demographic that is very helpful for um, athletes, right? I know a woman who she has a business, and her business is helping athletes transition from being a student athlete to now you're in the real world, right? You didn't go to the NBA or to a professional team. So now what do you do, right? Because their life for X number of years has been sports, right? Has been sports, and they just knew they were going to go beyond, and that doesn't happen for everybody. And so for what you're doing, for what she's doing, and others who may do something similar, it is so necessary because there's not a lot of preparation for our youth to live life.
Right, exactly. And that's something as well that I'd like to further get more into, too, as far as just spreading the word about different types of adulting topics and how to further help transition college students into the quote unquote real world. So I've actually been reaching out to other colleges and universities, locally as well as outside of Atlanta as well, just to see if I would be able to further speak with them or come onto their campus and talk more to the students, just so they will be able to learn more about what all goes into adulting and trying
Hmm.
to keep them as informed as possible so that once they actually get into the quote unquote real world, they'll be able to um, be be a lot more informed than
Hmm.
a lot of us are once we're thrown into the mix. So
Right.
yeah,
Thrown
definitely
in,
working on that.
definitely. That is the key word, thrown into it, because that is exactly what happens to the young adults. And so, again, the importance of relationship building and networking. So Julia Rock, is a woman I would like you to look up. She's who I was just talking about, as far
Okay.
as having business for helping student athletes transition out of that. So, you can invite her on your podcast, or you all can collaborate some kind of way, right? Because you're doing similar work. And for her, it's specifically for athletes. So, definitely valuable for you all to connect. And again, here's another real life example of, how we can collaborate with one another, right? How when people meet people, you have a conversation, and then it can lead to so many things. So
Yeah.
describe a memorable experience while teaching young professionals.
Um, that is a good question. I would say, well, does it have to be specifically young professionals?
No.
Because I would actually okay. So here's one. Okay, so I actually back when I was in corporate, um, there was actually this one opportunity where I ironically, I was teaching people life skills, but more on the creative aspects. So I was teaching them how to create their own videos, so they will be able to tell their own stories. And so, with the company that I was working for, they were very much in tune with the session that I was in with them. And it was basically a training session. And so I was making it super creative, and I'm very good as far as like presenting in general. So I made it super fun for them to be included in the session in general. Um, Music was involved, different types of games, questions were thrown in there in the mix. Uh, I even did some dances here and there, which is another fun thing that I like to do. Um, just to be able to see how much that the people were enjoying the opportunity and the experience that they were having thus far, and all the singing along and clapping and happiness that was on their faces. I would say that I very much enjoyed. That would definitely be a memorable experience as far as for me, in regard to teaching other individuals about how to um, develop their skills in something. So yeah, that would definitely be a top one off the top of my head.
That's awesome. And so, what you've shared pretty much throughout our conversation is that you enjoy being creative, right? And that podcasting, being a podcast producer, are different ways and avenues that you have to be creative. You've also shared how just now the memorable experience, but how you enjoy impacting others. Again, the whole teaching of life skills came from your personal experience as well as the experience of your brother. How else has any of this impacted your life?
Um, well, I would say, as far as how podcasting and animation has further developed my life, I would say, or impact in my life. I would say definitely in positive, positive ways. So as far as my podcast, again, Adulting 101 with Casby Bias on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Um, so I've been able to do certain things like, again, developing different types of animations, just to promote or further promote different episodes that I put out there. And I've seen a ton of different tips. People like the posts that I put out there and what have you. I've recently been featured on Apple Podcasts, their main page, as far as new and noteworthy podcast for Adulting 101 with Casby Bias. I've even recently been able to bring in a sponsor and also looking for other
Nice.
additional sponsors as well. BetterHelp, I was able to bring them in as far as the overall sponsors. So that was awesome when I was able to uh, further learn more about that opportunity and connect accordingly. So yeah, I would definitely say that has just different opportunities like that where I've been able to further put the word out as far as learning about life skills and finding creative ways to do that and put it out to the public. Um, those have definitely been some positive impacts on how my work has led to um, helping me as well as others out there.
That's awesome. So one thing that I just wrote down to make sure we talk about in October at Afros and Audio is sponsorships, because that's huge, and a lot of people want to know, how do we get sponsors, right? And when we know that typically people, they have an expectation that you have so many downloads, etc. But then I'm thinking, I'm just being hopeful and attracting and manifesting that it also can happen in a sense to where you have good content, you have a good topic, and maybe like you said, as far as getting a job or opportunities, you reach out to somebody and boom, they can end up sponsoring you. So we'll talk more about that in October. But I
All
do
right.
want to kind of like sum up a one particular point before we get into our last couple questions. So again, for anyone who is interested in possibly working in podcasting in some capacity, or having opportunities, several ways, like of course looking at the job boards, right, looking on LinkedIn, connecting with people who are doing the job that you are interested in and asking them how did they get into it, and or let me know if you know of any opportunities, utilizing platforms to demonstrate your expertise. So LinkedIn, writing posts that about whatever your expertise is, creating a podcast and talking about your expertise. Those are ways, as well, again, as the people who you connect with, letting them know what you're interested in and asking, hey, let me know of any opportunities. And or when you see an opportunity that's at a company that one of your connection works at, apply for it, let them know, or actually probably talk to them first, because when you fill out applications, often you can put in who referred you. So you want to talk to
Right.
them before you apply, so that you can potentially use their name. But also they can also, vouch for you or something like that. So I wanted to make sure that, we put that out there, because again, those couple of questions that have been asked, how do you get into it? Um, and I think with things in general now today is that go for it. Ask, let a
Right.
person know that this is what you want, and and then see what happens. So definitely that. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I would definitely agree with all of the things, all of the things that you said in regard to that. Um, yeah, just definitely, I would say overall it's just communication. Communication
Yeah,
is definitely key.
definitely.
So not being afraid to ask is definitely essential.
Hmm.
And just
Shooting your
being as
shot.
sensitive as possible. Yes,
Yes.
shoot your shot.
Shoot your shot.
Shoot your shot.
Shoot your shot.
Yes.
Okay, so the last question is, so I empower women to live a dream lifestyle. How are you living your dream lifestyle?
Um, how am I living my dream lifestyle? I would say that I'm dream or living my dream lifestyle by just creating things that I'm passionate about and putting it out there to the public. Um, yeah, and thus far, I feel like that's that's what creating my dream lifestyle is. I mean, people definitely seem to be enjoying enjoying it, whether it's through my Adulting 101 with Casby Bias podcast, or it's through, as you mentioned, like earlier, my TikTok uh, and Instagram videos with my mini me character dancing along with me. Um,
Lydia, Lynn, with Lynn.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes, yes. Her name's Lynn. Yes. So my name's Caspi, but my middle name is Lynn. So Cassie Lynn. So she's a part of me. So I felt like that would be a fitting name as well. But people don't usually combine the two together unless I'm in trouble. But that's a whole nother story. Um,
Right.
but yes, I just really enjoy to be able to create things that I'm very much passionate about and being able to put that out to the public, and to see them enjoy it so much really makes me happy inside, and just allows me to continue to push forward. So yeah, as far
I
as the
love
work and
I love that. So, other than, encouraging folks to come out and see us and see others at Afros and Audio, any final words?
no, not at this time, other than thank you guys so much for coming to today's session with me and Deneen. Thank you so much. If my Be sure to check out my podcast again. Might as well just throw a shout out in there. And one more time,
Absolutely.
make sure to check out my podcast again. It's Adulting 101 with Casby Bias. It's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, it's on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Just type that in and I'll pop up. Um, and be sure to check out other parts of my work as well on different social media platforms. See it popped up on the bottom as well. As far as my TikTok and Instagram, and my website is casbybias.com. Feel free to jump on that platform as well for all other different types of updates, posts, what have you, and just yeah, continue to keep pushing, guys. Oh yes, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn too. Yes, I just saw that pop up on the bottom. Yes, reach out to me wherever, guys. Yes.
With Casby Bias, thank you so much for being our first of three during our a series spotlighting the trailblazing Black women in the podcast industry, behind the scenes with the Black women in podcasts. And I'm Deneen L. Garrett. See you next month, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Deneen.
Bye.